On this episode of the Sports Opinions Podcast, 98.7 ESPN New York and MSG's Alan Hahn joins the show as we have a New York sports-filled show here. We talk about the Knicks and the Nets, Jets and the Giants, Yankees and Mets, and we kind of throw in our digs at the Houston Astros at the end, which you would want to hang around to listen to. So without any further ado, enjoy the show. What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and with me today is a guy that when I have a chance, when I'm flicking through the radio, I listen to a lot of talk radio and a lot of sports talk, political talk, but when I'm flicking through the radio, ESPN New York comes on. If I hear him on, there's a good chance I'm stopping and listening to at least what he has to talk about and following along with the rest of the show as long as I'm in the car. He is ESPN New York 98.7 and MSG's Alan Hahn. What's up, buddy?
That's a great intro. I appreciate that. The key is when you find me, because I'm all over the map. I usually am on at night, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you'll catch me on during the day. Sometimes they put me in a drive time. You'll get me on a Saturday morning every now and then. So it all depends on when you get me, but I usually try to bring it. So thanks.
Yeah. You're usually one of the people, and you've been a fan. So there's, especially sports talk radio, there's certain people you can ingest and, you could kind of tolerate. Some people you just don't want to listen to. And then there's people you actually enjoy listening to. You're one of the people that when you're giving a take, I don't always agree with it, but I just like the way you bring it. You always have some sort of basis for why you're saying what you're saying, and I completely appreciate that.
It's from years of experience, I guess. I was a beat writer for 15 years in the city, covered all the major teams, pretty much at one time or another, mainly NBA and NHL, but did also do some football. So when you've been around, you kind of understand how it works, and then radio gives you the opportunity to, when you're a fan, you see things your way through the prism of a fan. Mm-hmm. And I see it through the prism of a fan, but I also got the experience through the behind the scenes, what the media sees and what the media does and the conversations that go on in the media room and questions that are asked and why you do stories. And so I try to blend the two together to give you a perspective. And I love the fact that you said you don't always agree, because I don't want you to always agree. Sometimes I just want you to take the perspective and say, okay, maybe I get it, but I still don't like it. And that's fine with me. Because we're all going to have different opinions, but it's a matter of, do you respect where mine is coming from? That's, I think, the most important part of it, the credibility.
Exactly. And just from listening to you for so long, you definitely have gained that credibility for me. And speaking of busy, though, just want everyone to know, it's usually a little bit earlier from when I normally record, but Alan is a busy guy, and he's given me a nice slice of an hour from 4:30 to 5:30 as he sits in traffic on his phone heading from, I'd imagine, one gig to the next, because you're on tonight on the radio on the Han Solo Show on ESPN New York.
That's right. Yeah, and that's generally when I tell people, because I get in touch with a lot of people, and I work late. Like last night we had the Knicks game, and the Knicks played late, so I was on MSG. It was the 8 o'clock start Chicago, and we did the MSG 150 show after it, so I didn't get home till about 1 o'clock. Tried to sleep in a little bit, get some rest. So I always tell people, you want to get me, the time I'm spending where I'm doing nothing is pretty much when I'm on my way into the city, because it can take anywhere from an hour to an hour and 40 minutes, all depending on traffic. So I'm trapped in a car. This is the best time to get me. So take your time. Let's have some fun.
So you gave me the perfect transition. I just got to give one more PSA. Everyone, normally I do this when my daughter's asleep. There's a good chance you hear my daughter, my dogs, my wife in the background. So we could have some fun. There could be,
I love it.
There could be crying. There could be barking. It could be a little bit of everything. So we'll have a good time.
That's fine.
You mentioned the Knicks. We find you on MSG. You do Knicks post-game, pre-game. You do the Knicks Fix podcast still, which was a blog you did back in Newsday time, bringing it to everything. The Knicks Fix is Alan Hahn. But I have to really ask, a pressing issue right now is the Knicks are not playing well, which is as expected. The Knicks were not supposed to play well. You just, as a fan, and I think as someone on ESPN New York like you just wanted to see the Knicks have certain pieces that are playing well. And I think we're getting that. But the news came out that Steve Mills is angling to get Fizdale fired, which I disagree with. Even though I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, I don't like that because I like what Fizdale does and I like what the Knicks are doing, even though they're not playing well. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'll start it with this. It was a report that was happening. So let's begin with the fact that it's a report based on a source that gave, I think, a perspective on what they're anticipating happening. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not that I'm trying to dispute Woj. Obviously, he's has as much credibility as anybody in the business, and he has all the connections.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is that sometimes these reports come out, and they can come from sources that are trying to protect their guys, or maybe speculate, or even try to promote their guy, hoping maybe this job opens up and I've got the guy for it. So I see this happening. You know what I mean? So what I saw in Chicago, to me, was the opposite of they're trying to get him out. It was three guys that stuck together. And even in the press conference on Sunday night, Steve Mills said twice that they believe in the coach. So it wasn't, there wasn't anything publicly that suggested that they were losing patience with David Fizdale. And I kind of agree with you. We're 11 games into a season with more than half the roster is new. They've used, I think they're up to 6 or 7 different starting lineups already. They've had injuries to the most critical position, which is point guard. And they just haven't figured it out yet. They've had spurts where they've looked good. When in Dallas, they played really well in Boston. They played really well in San Antonio. They played well in Brooklyn. They've had games where you're like, all right, I can get into this. And then, but yet they've had games, like especially at home, which is the most maddening, where they play really poorly over a stretch and the game is over. And so they're at that awkward stage right now that I think just, people don't want to hear this, but it's going to take time. And this is the toughest part. This is what you really got to endure and get through, is this awkward stage of making it work and figuring out what players fit and what players don't. So, look, there was collective accountability on Sunday night when they all went out and spoke, which I thought, it was odd. You don't normally see that, but I saw it as collective accountability, that they weren't just having Fizdale face the music for the team's struggles. And those guys who built the team also went out and talked to the media. And then even though there's a bit of a hailstorm about how they're trying, like that one story that suggested that they're angling to get rid of the coach, I also saw a report from Ian Begley of SNY who had talked to people, and his sources say that all three are pretty much being held accountable. And it's not just one person that is on notice right now. So I think the three of them collectively understand that they're all sort of, it's going to be all for one or one for all in this situation, I think. So I think that's where it's at. But you're a Nets fan. So let me ask you, do you remember early last season, before it really turned, what it felt? Remember how they were struggling big time? And there were some whispers. Now, I know this because I'm friends with Kenny Atkinson. But there were whispers that maybe he's not the right coach. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and, I was going to bring up that Knicks fans won't like to hear this, but they are where the Nets were when the Marks and Atkinson regime was starting 3-4 years ago.
Yeah,
where there was a lot of young talent pieces that you need to ride out. And I do remember because Atkinson was benching D'Angelo Russell for long periods.
Right.
Doing certain things that a coach needs to do to establish himself. And I think by doing that, he's established himself already to a Kyrie Irving to be a coach that is not afraid to coach. And I think that was important to see. And I think Knicks fans and Knicks front office, I think they have the right guys. I think Perry, Mills are good in the front office. They're basketball guys. I like Fizdale as a coach. And they just need to go through and be patient. I know with Dolan as the owner, it's not easy for them to see patience because he's a pedal to the metal type of guy and he likes to make these quick decisions. But I feel like,
and it's been 6 years. You gotta add that too. It's been a long time. I think everybody, is impatient. But yeah, I think the parallel to the Nets, as much as Knicks fans don't want to hear it, is very similar. But what's different, of course, is that the Nets operate in a vacuum where when things go poorly, people just ignore them. For the Knicks, when things go poorly, everybody's got something to say, and it's the sky is falling, and there's just a lot more emotion and coverage and intensity about it. And so because of it, it feels like it's chaos, when really it's what a lot of teams go through in this stage. And so, look, if they continue, if they don't show progress, then you have to start really making, those kind of decisions. You have to look and say, okay, 10 games is not a marker. A quarter of the season, you start to get a sense, and from there. But if you're not seeing progress and you're not seeing, especially young players, improve, that's when I think you make that kind of a change, when you start to say to yourself, maybe we don't have the right leadership. But not at this point. This is that awkward stage that a lot of teams go through. But with the Knicks, you're not operating in the vacuum that most teams get to do when they're in this process. So, that's why it tends to be mayhem. And look, for us, it's great because there's passion, which means that's good for our business. We get people that care. We get callers. We get, a lot of intensity and energy. But for the team, it's a lot harder to work in that environment because, think about it, literally in a foxhole. You got bombs blowing up all over the place, and you're trying to, build a house of cards. So, it's not easy for them, but that's, as they say, that's why they get paid the big bucks.
Quick last word on the Knicks for me. Knicks fans, take heart. 3 names you just need to remember that need to hang around: Mitchell Robinson, Kevin Knox, and RJ Barrett. As long as those three
RJ Barrett's a keeper.
As long as they're improving, then everything else will build around them. And I've said it on a few podcasts before. If they improve and Fizdale shows that he can improve these guys, getting Giannis Antetokounmpo is not out of the question. When he's in off,
I'm not ready to go there. We've played that whole free agency thing before. I'd much rather just develop some players and see where you go. What else comes in the draft? They've got a ton of draft picks in their stable as well. So, some fans get caught up in that. Who's the next star free agent? After this summer, I'm not. Alex, you could say it. I'm not going to do it.
All right. Well, I'm not going to put that to you. But my Nets actually ended up, I would say, winning free agency this time around. They were very good in terms of how they did. They have Kyrie Irving, who, at this point, amid stupid reports from a Boston reporter, who I know Jackie McMullen's a very respected reporter, and then Bill Simmons jumped on, but they're both Boston people that have a grudge against Kyrie, so I kind of take their reports with a grain of salt, even though they're fantastic.
That's accurate.
But
yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, there's a little axe to grind there. That's true.
And he's playing well. And then they have Kevin Durant on the outskirts. And again, Knicks fans, the Nets have gone from 20 wins to 29 to 40. And now we're expecting 46 to 47 wins with this current team, anywhere from 45 to that range. When KD's healthy next season, as long as this team builds camaraderie, are you seeing a championship run within the next 3 years for the Nets?
I really got to see what he looks like coming off Achilles, because we've seen, players can't come back from Achilles, but the first year back, you're battling athleticism, timing, don't have the same bounce, balance is off, your shot. Like, there's a lot of things that's weird about that. Plus he's over 30. So, I got to see what he looks like physically and how it all obviously comes together. Do I think there'll be a team that's a contender in the East? Of course. You're going to have 2 players who are arguably top 20 players, and one of them is a top 5 player. So, you can put that in, maybe even top 15 players, the 2 of them. So I do think that they're going to be very much, up there in the East. However, I do want to see what he looks like physically, because the Achilles it's a funny injury. It takes away a little bit of your, athleticism. It takes away a little bit. You're almost grounded a little bit for a while. It takes some time to get that back. He's going to have to play with the minutes restrictions and stuff early on. So it all remains to be seen. But, the potential's certainly there. I'll tell you what, I thought this year they were going to – I looked at the beginning of the schedule, and I said they could be 15-5. Look at this schedule. But they're dealing with some things. Karas's injury is going to be a concern now. And I know Kyrie's got a bit of a shoulder issue, so they're off to a bit of a slow start. But I think, though, if they can get it right by the second half, they could be a very interesting team.
They could be. And the one thing with KD is, it might be my Nets fans' rose-colored glasses, but he's athletic. He has always been athletic, but he's never been the guy that is the LeBron-esque, I'm going to drive and dunk on everybody. He's relied on his jump shot a lot throughout his career.
True.
He's relied on sly, slick moves, good dribbling, but not amazing dribbling. So his athleticism has always been secondary, where his shooting has been his primary weapon. And I think as long as he's confident in his shooting and he can get up and down the court, I think he'll be fine. And I don't think the Nets fans are going to be mad if he doesn't play much defense when he gets back.
Now, the one thing, though, about shooting with the Achilles is the balance. That's the one thing you got to worry about, the lift and the balance, because that can throw off your shot, and it's something he'd have to adjust to. That's the only thing. It's that, and remember, he's also a quick release kind of player. He's that guy that yes, he has the length to get the release off, but he's also somebody that had that one little step, one little jab, whatever it is, that can freeze a defender, and you don't know what, can the Achilles, again, it's almost like you're in mud. Those first couple of months. That's all I'm saying. But you're right. He's not somebody that is a high flyer, that relies so much on that. He has to change his game. Dominique Wilkins was able to do it later in his career.
Oh, yeah.
He was still able to be a 20-point scorer. So, there are ways around it, and he's obsessed with basketball, and he'll figure something out.
And that's what I'm confident in. And, you spoke of recovery, and it seems like the two football teams in the New York area, I don't count Buffalo because I consider Buffalo to be Canada, so that Canada can have them. But the two football teams in New York seem to be in recovery mode right now. Both the Jets and the Giants are struggling. We saw them play against each other in a much more competitive game and a much funner game than I thought anyone that was going to see. And I'm going to lay it on you right now. We've seen almost 19 games from Sam Darnold. We've seen a little bit of Daniel Jones. Who, from your eye test right now, is the better young quarterback?
It's a tough question. The question I ask a lot of people is, because they play each other every 4 years, the Jets and the Giants. And 4 years from now, who has a better chance to still be in that game? I think that's another interesting question to ask about that matchup. But the better quarterback, I think Daniel's legs have really been something that's caught a lot of people by surprise. His ability, his escapability, his accuracy is way more than I think people thought when they watched him at Duke. There was some concerns about his accuracy, but he's been tremendous. His problem is ball security. As we know, he turns the ball over a lot, not on interceptions, but on fumbles. Now, when protection gets better, that should help him, but he is a lot better than a lot of the so-called experts thought, even though, the main guys who do the draft for ESPN, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, both liked him. Everybody else trashed the Giants for taking him, which led fans to trash the Giants for taking him. But once you watch him, you realize that, those guys knew what they were talking about, and the Giants knew what they were getting. He's good. Does he have the potential to be great? That's the question. Sam Darnold, to me, has, I think, he has irrational confidence as a young player. I use that phrase because when you say irrational confidence, it's like, why are you that confident? What are you doing? It's like, it's like when I was single and I would hit on, women I shouldn't even be talking to. It's irrational confidence, but you do it because you believe in yourself, right? And so the fact that he believes in himself so much tells me that there's a lot there that we haven't seen yet with Sam Darnold. And physically, he's built sturdy, so he's strong. He doesn't look like somebody, he looks like he won't wear down. Now, he can run. We don't see him run nearly as much, but he can run. But he's not as fleet as Daniel Jones. He throws picks, and has accuracy issues. So it's almost like I'd say they're pretty equal, but not the same quarterback. Does that make sense? Like if I'm going to grade them for potential, I grade them both like I'd say, like a 7 to 9 grade for potential, but they're both two really different type of quarterbacks.
I can completely agree with your assessment, and I'm a Jets fan, so I'm
going to start off. It's a cop out, isn't it?
A little bit, but you know what though? You from years of experience from being in radio and writing and beat writing, you guys kind of become diplomats and politicians in terms of those types of answers. So you got good at that. But
that's called CYA. Yeah, it's called CYA. If I give an answer that's a freezing cold take, I'll never hear the end of it.
Well, I mean, if someone hears about it, you can always go defend it on the radio, which will be fun. But when it comes to Darnold, I'm a Jets fan. So what I see with Darnold, and I have to say, when the Jets were drafting, when he was coming out, my guys that I wanted were Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, and then Sam Darnold. Not because of Darnold's arm talent. He has the arm talent of anyone I've ever seen. He's as good of a thrower. But my issues was at USC, he was always good for the big turnover. He was very good. He would have a great game. He would have a stat line of 27 and 33 with 3 touchdowns, but that one pick would be the pick in the fourth quarter at the 5-yard line in the red zone. And,
devastating.
And we're seeing that right now.
True.
We're seeing that right now, and I think a lot has to do with the pressure. He's getting hit a lot. But we're kind of seeing that gunslinger Jay Cutler-esque mentality where Jay Cutler, I think, is a good comparison with him, where the arm talent was all world. Jay Cutler had one of the strongest arms we've ever seen. But he was a gunslinger, and he wasn't a gunslinger in the Brett Favre mentality where he was good enough to be that guy. And I'm concerned that the gunslinger mentality is Darnold, but it's more Jay Cutler than it is Brett Favre. So that's my Darnold take.
What about Troy Aikman?
Troy Aikman was a different...
Troy Aikman early in his career. The same issues.
Troy Aikman is more akin to the John Elway style, where I feel like they both took calculated risks. Yeah, they were taking risks when they threw the ball in the tight windows.
Yeah, but early in their careers, they both threw it away. And I go back to the irrational confidence thing. There's a reason why they throw what they throw. It's hero ball.
Yeah.
It's I believe I can make that throw. I know I can make that throw, and they make it, and they try it. You know, I think Cutler was a little more reckless because he just never wanted to eat it. Like he was always about like, I'll roll the dice on this one. I'll take the risk. I'll give it a shot. Like he's more of I'll give it a shot. Where I think Sam sees something and says, I can make that. Because I saw him 2 years at SC, and you're exactly right. That was the biggest thing with him is he'd have these fantastic games, and then all of a sudden you're like, why would you throw that? Like it didn't even make sense. Like you threw that ball. Why? He threw it not because he's like, oh, let me just fling this thing out there. He saw it and goes, yeah, I can make that. I can make it. So I'm hoping that over time and film study, that's the other thing I love, by the way. Both of these quarterbacks, what I love about them, they are obsessed with football. That's a great thing. And you might say to me, that's ridiculous, Alan. Any pro would be obsessed. That's not necessarily true.
No, they're not.
Daniel and Sam, the two things you love about them is they are both football nerds. It's all they care about. It's all they talk about. It's all they want to do. So that alone gives me the feeling like they're going to get better. They're going to be fine. You know, like they're not about being celebrities. They're not about all that stuff. They want to be great football players. They study. I love that. So I'm hoping in Sam's case, he'll get better. He'll see the throws he shouldn't be making. Maybe they'll squelch some of that irrational confidence and take away the hero ball with the more film he watches and the more times he sees, like, oh, you know what, that's just not there, and I'll know better. Because you're starting to see him throw it away now more than he ever used to. You know, he's just going to, you know, Daniel does it too, but that game against the Giants, there were a couple of times that Daniel just went right into the sidelines, just, you know, throw it right at the mascot, as they say. And I thought, that's a step. You know, it's a minor step, but it's a step. But I think, you know, again, that going back to the 4 years thing, when they play each other in 4 years, I do think there's something, even though both teams are terrible right now record-wise, and there's, you know, a lot of chaos about both franchises, they do have quarterbacks here. They do have two young quarterbacks to be excited about, and I can't wait to see where both teams are and both players are 4 years from now when they meet again at MetLife, when the Giants are the home team, and where are we at that point in the process? That's going to be exciting.
I hope you're right about Sam Darnold. I really do. And when it comes to Daniel Jones, I have to say I was a hater. I did not see a lot of good from him. I saw him playing well at Duke, but just certain games that I saw where the accuracy issues were there, and maybe it had to do with a little bit of lack of talent that he was playing with. But, you know, he concerned me. But not on the Giants. I told Giants fans he's absolutely not the reason why they lost that game. Yes, he does fumble, but I feel like that has to do with being young and the speed of the game, not understanding that every single D lineman, even a 350-pounder, runs a 4.6. So there's that aspect to it I catch up to. But I just see certain throws and certain connections. And Sam has it, and he has too. They both command the huddle. And guys that are veterans of 11, 12 years
Absolutely.
are looking at them for instruction. He's telling guys where to go. And one thing that he's doing better than Sam right now is he's walking up and calling out protections better than Sam Darnold is doing. And Sam Darnold has a year in the league over.
Great point.
And I love that about Daniel Jones. While I'm watching him, he sees a Mike backer making an adjustment, and he's stopping, looking at the play clock, going, I got 5 seconds, making an adjustment, getting back there, taking the snap, and making the right read. Whether it's complete or incomplete,
that's a great point.
Playing that chess game, and I love that about Jones. Now, I have to ask you, we're talking about all this. Who has the harder road to becoming a contender within the next 5, 10, whatever year?
Who has the harder road, the Jets or the Giants?
Yeah.
I would argue the harder road is the Giants, mainly because that division is so competitive. That the Jets division is often not competitive. That it's one team and one team only, and we all know it's the curse word, the Patriots.
Boo.
But that isn't going to last forever because Tom Brady is he going to be a quarterback when he's 50? Bill Belichick's not getting any younger either. Eventually, Father Time's going to catch up to the Patriots, and things will change. The question is, of course, who's then ready to take over the division after that? So, so if you're asking me who has the easier route, I would just argue the Jets just based on division, because that NFC East is, that's a brawl every year. The Eagles are going to be good. The Cowboys are always going to be good. Like this is just what you're going to deal with on a year in, year out basis. You're never going to see that division where it's like everybody stinks. Whereas the AFC East, you can't trust half these teams to be good over a long period of time. You'll get the Bills for a couple of years, the Jets for a couple of years. 10 years ago, the Dolphins had I think they actually were the only team to win a division.
Yep.
Other than the Patriots in the last 15 years. So, but you never get anything consistent from anyone else. So that's why I use that as my basis for why the Jets would have the easier route.
Well, at least you're making me happy with your answers about, the Nets being good and the Jets being good. You're 2 for 2 in my favorite teams right now, so you're doing well here. We're going to talk some New York baseball, and we'll talk about the Yankees second because they're the relevant team. But we're going to start off with the Mets.
Yep.
Carlos Beltran hired as the manager now. I don't know how to feel about that move. I know nothing about Beltran's managing acumen, but we know it's a general manager-driven league. So what's Beltran's effect in terms of the locker room? And what do you think how is the adjustment going to be in terms of middle of the game, bullpen changes, feeling that type of stuff out? Or is he just going to kind of go with a notebook like Girardi did?
Yeah, well, I think, manager in baseball is the one coaching aspect of sports that has changed the most dramatically. That we're seeing now that it's all former players who understand a clubhouse, who can, they can, I don't know if you rally players. See, baseball is a funny sport. You can't play harder in baseball because if you try harder, it's bad for you. You have to relax. So I don't know how you put it, but you can just relate to a player. You can see when he's going through a slump. You can talk him through it, right? And the one thing about Beltran, I covered Beltran when he actually first signed with the Mets. Mm-hmm. I was at Port St. Lucie for his first workout that year, right after he had signed. So, I got to know him there, and over the years, obviously, he went to the Yankees, and the one thing everybody said about him is that everybody in the clubhouse loved him, no matter who you were, what your background was. He could relate to everybody. He was that kind of a guy. And, of course, he was so talented that everybody respected his talent, and he was always one that was willing to share what he saw in the game and pass it down to younger players. So that's what people believe will make him a good manager. Remember, Aaron Boone was an ESPN broadcaster. Then he stepped into the Yankee dugout, and, he had to figure some things out in his first year. He was a little dry. But over time, you're seeing him emerge now as a guy that his players love. So Definitely. They have the binder. They have the stats. This is how they play baseball now. This is what they do. So the manager isn't necessarily managing games anymore. They're managing people. Even the lineup is decided by matchups and analytics. You don't go off gut feel. A guy could have a 4-for-4 game, but if the next pitcher has dominated him throughout his career, the analytics will tell you he should sit. Today should be a rest day for him. And you're like, what are you, nuts? This guy's on a hot streak right now. Nope, they don't believe in it. And that's just the truth. And I mean, old heads like me, we don't understand that stuff, but that's exactly how they do it now. So that's why I don't worry about what's his experience in managing a game. It's how can he relate to people? What kind of face of the franchise will he be? Talking to the media, will he sound a little stumbly and bumbly? Mickey Callaway is another nice guy, but when you hand him the wrong lineup card for a game, that's just poor attention to detail. And that could have been an assistant coach's fault for all I know, but you're still the manager. That's your fault. So, that's the stuff that I think you watch with Beltran, but his reputation is as somebody that really can get along with everybody, is a guy that can motivate, is a guy that can teach. He knows the game really well. He knows the insides and outsides of it, obviously, because he played it at the highest level possible. So that's why I think it's a pretty good hire. I think it's a pretty good hire, but there'll always be the question of why didn't the Mets go after an experienced guy like a Girardi or a Buck Showalter, because this is a young core that might have needed an older manager.
Yeah, there's going to be questions, and the first time the Mets have a slip-up, which will probably happen early, it's going to be questioned. But one thing I've noticed about baseball players, and, correct me if I'm wrong, you've talked to a lot more than I have, but I've noticed that baseball players are mentally the strongest and weakest athletes at the same exact time, where they are mentally strong, point. Battle through slumps, and they need to talk, but they have their certain things that it's a huge mental game, baseball. Where at the same time they're weak because a minor thing goes wrong and that can trigger a slump, and it has less to do with physical than it does to do with the mental game. And I feel like managers back in the day, like your Buck Showalters, like your Joe Torres, like your Tony La Russa's, who just got hired as a baseball position, not managing, are kind of guys where they're just like, man, figure it out. Talk to your teammates, talk to the batting coach, figure it out. Where now managers are expected to pull players aside, like you said, like Beltran can pull a kid aside and go, listen, I know what you're going through. This is what I used to do when I was in a slump. If it doesn't work for you, let me know. We'll go back to the drawing board. Where before, managers will be like, I'm not here to cater.
That's exactly it.
I'm not here to cater to you. Just figure it out.
That's right.
Man. You're a pro.
Right.
You're
That's exactly
paid.
Right.
So it's a weird thing. Now, a manager that I'm going to say, you talked about Aaron Boone. His seat might be warming up a little this year, and I think people are going to think that's crazy because 2 chances of going to the World Series, in 2 straight seasons. But the 2 things we've seen from the Yankees in 2 straight seasons is the playoffs come and they can't hit. And I don't know if it's a managerial thing, but I feel like that's going to fall on Aaron Boone if we see a repeat of it this season. What do you think about Aaron Boone? And if it's another season where the postseason comes and they can't hit, is his seat going to heat up real quick?
See, I think that's when you start looking at Brian Cashman and you start wondering, are you making the right personnel decisions here? Because the idea that they have bought into of the all or nothing of home runs, and they don't mind a high volume of strikeouts because a high volume of strikeouts also comes with a high volume of home runs. But being top home runs over the last 2 seasons hasn't gotten you out of the ALCS. So, do you need to be a more well-rounded team than you have been? Is this just the style? Like, I kind of joke that the way the Yankees play is very similar to Mike D'Antoni in basketball, his style, which it's a lot of fun during the regular season and it can win you a lot of games, but it never wins in the playoffs. And I think that's something that you got to watch. Are they still steadfast in the idea that they are going with power hitters, load the lineup with power hitters, and just try to, beat you to death and then use the bullpen? Or are they going to change it up and be more of a versatile team that can put runners on, that can, get runners over, that can put pressure on pitching when opposing pitching is so comfortable when they know you're going to be a free swinger? But if you've got people on base and opposing pitchers no longer comfortable. So the Yankees have to be, you have to figure out if they're going to stick to this style, or if they're going to change it and be, maybe start making adjustments to be more of a team that can win in the postseason. And if they don't, I don't know if that's Aaron Boone, because we know he's not the one deciding that's the way to play. I think it's Brian Cashman and all of his so-called stat nerds that have said this is the way to win. So I do think if another year goes by, it might be, that's when I think you start questioning the strategy that they have laid out.
Yeah, and and I think the proof's in the pudding there, because you see a guy like Miguel Andujar was hurt all season, and his replacement, Gio Urshela, is a much more contact hitter. DJ LeMahieu was the MVP of the team, very much a contact hitter. Didier Gregorius, one of the better players on the team, who's going to walk this year, sadly enough, contact hitter. And when their big bats were out, middle of the year, they arguably played some of their best baseball when it was a lot of get guys on base, manufacture runs. So there's something in that. But the weakest link of the Yankees, or the supposed weakest link, has been their starting pitching, even though in the playoffs it was not weak at all. I thought they did a good job. But the Yankees have been linked to be the front runner for Garrett Cole, definitely wanting to talk to Steven Strasburg, and then today saying that they have interest in Madison Bumgarner. What are the Yankees' chances of locking up one of these guys, two, or maybe go crazy and get all three?
I'll tell you what, I'll give you a hot take that I'm going to say on my show tonight involving the Yankees. My hot take is, my fear is they're going to now be used as leverage. Now, I don't know if, Madison Bumgarner never seemed like a guy that would want to play in New York. Garrett Cole might. He's got a bit of an ego. He might, but we know that Zach Greinke didn't. But if the Yankees are in the game for you, you'll flirt with them just to keep the price up, so you can get the money that you want. Now, the Yankees in the past have tried to stay out of that game. If you're not serious about us, then forget it, we're out. Because they didn't want to be used as leverage. But they might be a little more desperate now to stay in the game and say, okay, we didn't want to go for that 6th year for Corbin, and that cost us. So maybe we should think about going deeper than 5 years on a contract so we can get our guy. And if that's the case, and you're a pitcher out there who's making sure I'm going to get every dime I can get, you want to keep the Yankees in the market. Because if the Yankees are in the market, the price stays high. And so I'm a little concerned that they might be that team that gets used as leverage more than being more of a legit team that someone would want to come to. It's something to definitely keep an eye on, because, again, does Madison Bumgarner seem like a guy that would just love playing in New York and dealing with New York media?
Yeah, and and I'm going to go down, I'm talking about the three, I'm going to go from my least likely to my most likely. My least likely guy is Steven Strasburg. I don't see Steven Strasburg wanting to come to New York at all. I think he actually likes the Nationals, and I've been under the assumption that he just wants to get more money and restructure that deal. Madison Bumgarner, to me, my fear is he'll come over to the Yankees and be Randy Johnson, where he's a big lefty, but he's going to be good for the Yankees, but not what he is and not what he was on his former team or teams. So that's my fear for him. I think Garrett Cole's the most likely guy. I think Garrett Cole wants to be a Yankee. He's a guy I think wants to be a Yankee. And I think that they'll give him the 6th year because, like you said, they lost out on Corbin because they won't do the 6th year, and they saw what Cole can do. So I think Garrett Cole's the most likely guy. And just getting him would make this rotation between him, Paxton, Tanaka, and Severino when healthy. That's a good 4 pitchers. Not the Astros, but really good. So that's my take on those guys.
Let me ask you this. Are you concerned at all that whatever Garrett Cole was taught when he went from Pittsburgh to Houston, that they took advantage of his spin rate, which is off the charts, and taught him some things? Are you concerned that once he goes to the Yankees, he loses some of those, let's just say, tricks that we've realized the Astros have taken full advantage of over the last couple of years, if you know what I mean? Because how does Verlander go from what he was in Detroit to what he is now? And then Cole was good, but he wasn't that good. Now all of a sudden he's just the best pitcher in baseball and hittable. Like, do you wonder that once you take him out of the magic box, does he lose the magic?
Yeah, there is that concern, but I also think that even Pittsburgh, Garrett Cole, would be an improvement and definitely help this rotation. So I feel like you do take that chance, and he commands that type of money.
I agree.
And Verlander, I've been saying there's no way Verlander goes from being on the Tigers to being dead in the water as a pitcher. He should have retired after his last year as a Tiger to being a Cy Young candidate.
Yes.
I thought he was juicing or using something. So there was always something fishy. I have to ask you about that because it just came up. The Astros 2017, it came out that the pitcher said they were using a camera to steal signs, which I think, it's one of those situations where the Astros aren't the only team that's doing it. No one's stupid. The Astros, they're just the ones that got caught, and there's the whistleblower there. But for me, you got caught, and that taints everything you do. I would love to see baseball vacate their championship and make them an example and just say there was no champion in 2017. Stop doing this or it'll be harsher. That might be hard, but I think they should do it.
That's aggressive. I got to say, that's aggressive. What I'd rather see them do, because you can't, you vacate a championship, then all they can do is then start finding reasons to say, well, this team was doing it too. Look, they just weren't doing it as well as we were. Whatever it is, that would be too big of a battle and too ugly of a PR nightmare. But I do think, taking draft picks like they did to the Patriots, that doesn't do anything in baseball. I think what you do, in my opinion, and it's something I think Michael Kay talked about, which was smart, is you hit them where it hurts the most. You hit them in the cap. You either cap their payroll, which would force them to make some tough decisions on players that they'd want to re-sign and they can't, or you lower their luxury tax threshold, which then creates where they're paying a higher level of tax, which is essentially a fine, that also might force them to say, well, all right, I don't want to pay the tax, so we're going to have to get rid of this player or these two players that we wanted to sign, but now we won't. I think doing stuff, hitting them in the wallet is what hurts teams more. Vacating a championship, first of all, like I said, would be extremely difficult to do. But also, everybody knows they won. It's almost like that would just be a show. It wouldn't really mean anything. You'd still know they won. They would still claim they won. I think it'd be better if you just hit them in the wallet, either cap their payroll for a year or lower their luxury tax and force them to make some tough roster decisions and contract decisions that could mess with their team. It could cost them a player or two that would weaken them, and therefore I think it has a bigger effect than it does, than maybe making them a martyr by taking away their championship.
Yours and Michael Kay's plans make a lot more sense, but I like being an irrational Yankees fan, and that's why I'm a podcast host and you're a radio host. So I can say things like that, but no,
I love it.
Yours makes a lot more sense.
I love it.
Definitely, and it has to call to question, fair or unfair, how talented are their hitters right now? We saw George Springer pop up and become the best leadoff hitter in the league. We saw Alex Bregman become a power hitter really out of nowhere. Jose Altuve, a power hitter in a small body. Carlos Correa is an unbelievable talent, and he slumped, and it makes you question how you can slump when you know the pitches. But it has to call to question, Gurriel, exactly. Yeah. It has to call to question, are these guys actually that talented? Yeah. And it's unfair for those guys who, yes, they cheated, whether they were forced by A.J. Hinch to cheat or not, we don't know. I think Hinch needs to come down on him big time because he's the one that mocked the Yankees for hearing whistling and saying if that's all we had to do to get the Yankees off their game, then, AJ, you were cheating and you knew it, and it should come down. I think also we should definitely figure out a way to come down hard on him. Yeah. So, man. So, it's a good way to get me angry at the end of the podcast, Alan.
Well, that's what we like. We like passion. It's what you want. So, I don't know if you saw, because Houston fans, by the way, their fan base, and it's not just Astros, it's the sports fans in Houston. They are the most entitled. You think New Yorkers are? Yeah. So the Knicks played in Houston last year, late in the season. They're a young team. Everybody knows what they are, right? They're kids. Mm-hmm. They weren't supposed to win, so that's what they are. So, the Rockets are blowing them out going into the fourth quarter. And James Harden and Chris Paul and the rest of the bench get up and leave, and they go in the locker room. The bench now is empty. There's no one there. There's 4 minutes left in the game. They unloaded the bench, so all the subs are in. and all the starters went to the locker room. So that's quite disrespectful. I mean, it really is. It's disrespectful. You stay out for the rest of the game. No, they had no interest in it. They went in the locker room. So I did this thing about how that's fine. The Knicks don't deserve your respect because of where they are, but karma. Just remember karma. Like this is just one of those things you don't do. It's just not right to do. And the vitriol that came at me was, I mean, insane. I had sports radio knuckleheads in Houston coming at me and stuff, and all they're doing is just talking about how they won in '94, and I'm like, really, dude? That's what we're going to talk about? That? It's 25 years ago. Who cares? But it's incredible how now when this comes out, and I'm always talking about how James Harden flops and he's always cheating for fouls and all that stuff. And now this comes out about the Astros. And you get so you're passionate. You're like, they should be punished. But it's almost like I feel like they're being punished because they're being exposed, right? You're being exposed. So if you're an Astros fan, isn't there a part of you deep down that's like, yeah, we won a championship, but it's a bit of a fraud championship. Even though you're like, no, it's not, we won, there's a part of you that you'll never admit to yourself, you will, yeah, that was a fraud title.
Alan, but that's like saying that
was
Boston
definitely a fraud title.
That Boston fans are self-reflective and are looking at the Tuck rule and are looking at the deflated ball and are looking at Spygate and going, man, our dynasty's really tainted. No, as fans, they're sitting there puffing their chest out going, championships. And I think Houston fans are the same way. And
they have a lot of them.
That's true.
Houston has one, though. It's one thing if you had, the Patriots have a ton. So they can just sort of well, we want a whole bunch. So I guess if you're that good at cheating, the hell with it. But for the Astros, it's the only one. Because think about it, they didn't win a single home game in the World Series.
Yeah.
So if you're cheating to win games in your building and you can't win a single home game, you couldn't win a Game 7. Pull out all the stops. It's a Game 7, right? Yep. And they couldn't win that game. So that tells you whatever you were doing to cheat, you got caught, you can't do it anymore, and guess what? You can't win. You might dominate at home during the regular season, but once you get to the postseason and it's too loud for anybody to hear you banging your stupid bat on the bat rack or whatever, no one can hear it because it's so loud in the building. Well, I guess your cheating methods aren't working anymore because you couldn't win. How embarrassing is that? You couldn't win a single playoff game in your own building, which you won so much because you cheat well in your own building.
And
so I said, deep down, there's got to be a part of Astros fans that are like, oh, man.
And I like the fact that I got the anger out of Alan Hahn as well. It is a very nice ending to this show. So with that, that is going to be the end of the podcast. Once again, thank you, Alan Hahn, 98.7 ESPN New York and MSG host, for coming on the show. Really had fun doing it, bud.
Oh, likewise. A lot of fun. It's a good warm-up for my show tonight, so I appreciate it. It's like a bullpen session.
There you go. Yeah. So any social media plugs, obviously your show, anything you want to give out to anybody so they can find you?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Alan Hahn, AlanHahn. On Instagram is AHahnMSG. And the show has a Facebook page, Hahn Solo Show, as well. So you can go to any of them.
Yeah, definitely go give it a check out. Like I said, he's I can't always listen to radio. I listen to it when I'm in the car, but if I hear Alan Hahn's voice on, it's definitely worth listening to because if you listen to the show at all, he has awesome takes. But again, I'm Alex Cuesta. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at _Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30. Instagram, SportsOpinions30. Search us on Facebook. And however you are listening to this, wherever you are listening to this, make sure you give me 5 stars, give me a good review, because then that pushes me up so you can hear my awesome guests talk about sports and you can hear me regurgitate whatever I say most of the weeks. But again, everyone, I really appreciate you all listening. Have a good one.